Good afternoon. My name is Read Katz, and I live in Columbia, Missouri. It is always a bittersweet when I am asked to speak at a committee meeting or an event like this. Sweet because I am honored that organizations like Women's Voices Raised for Social Justice that I revere think that I can do something to help a cause I am so passionate about. And bitter because the story I have to tell that led me to speak up is heartbreaking. My story resonates and hits a chord with people on both sides of the debate. It is a story that could happen to anyone. I'm a college-educated, stay-at-home mom to a wonderful 18-month-old, a devoted wife of 7 years, a somewhat stereotypical woman who loves romantic comedies and chocolate, and 3 years ago this August, I had an abortion. New Year's Eve 2011, after 5 years of marriage, my husband and I decided we were ready for kids. By May, I was pregnant and we were ecstatic. My husband had just gotten a promotion. We were buying a house with a white picket fence. We were going to be a family. Our dreams were coming true, but everything changed when at 16 weeks, we found out that the baby I was carrying had a greater than 1 in 10 chance of having trisomy 18, a chromosomal defect that is described by the Trisomy 18 Foundation's website as usually fatal, with most babies dying before birth, and those who do make it to birth typically living only a few days. However, a small number of babies, less than 10%, live for at least 1 year. All I felt was disbelief. We had opted for genetic testing because I had been adopted and we knew nothing about my genetic makeup, and because a pregnancy book had recommended it. Never in a million years did we think it would actually have an impact on us. I was 17 weeks, 1 day pregnant when we met with a genetic counselor who told us more about the tests and our results, as well as about trisomy 18. We then met with a doctor who performed a higher resolution ultrasound than the ones in your average OB's office. The ultrasound lasted about a half an hour. Several problems were found, including an atrial septal defect, a large hole between the upper two chambers of the heart, an unusually small stomach, more than likely caused by esophageal atresia, where the esophagus does not connect to the stomach, meaning the baby cannot eat by mouth, and other markers of trisomy 18. It was then we decided to have an amnio, as it would be the only way to know for sure if our baby had trisomy 18. 2 days later, we got the initial results back, confirming a trisomy 18 diagnosis, a diagnosis that is incompatible with life. It was after much soul searching and with a heavy heart that after talking with my husband, family, rabbi, and doctor, that I made the most difficult choice I have ever had to make. But I knew that by bringing this child into the world, I would be condemning him or her to a life in a hospital and to a life of pain. What kind of life would that be? So I made the choice that was best for myself, my family, and my baby. I chose to have an abortion. Being a Christian facility, my doctor's hospital normally does not permit terminations. But she petitioned the ethics board, and after looking over my baby's diagnosis and prognosis, the board deemed that in this case they would allow her to terminate the pregnancy. They would allow her to perform an abortion. I was admitted on a Saturday morning and had the procedure before sunrise the next day. After, my doctor came to tell me that she had examined our baby and she noticed some other physical defects that had the baby been born alive, it would have been born in agony. We named our baby Rose after a dream I had while I was in the hospital. Rose's remains were cremated, and on what should have been her birthday, my husband and I scattered her ashes in the Pacific Ocean near where we had met in hopes that she would travel the world in the wind and see all the places we could only dream of showing her. That is Rose's story. I share it because when I lost Rose, it was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. Not only did I lose a child, but I felt alone. There is a stigma associated with having an abortion, so although there are many other women like me, rarely do they feel safe sharing their story. I decided I would share Rose's story because I didn't want to feel only sadness when I thought of her, because that Because what child wants that to be the feeling they invoke in their mom? And by sharing, I may be able to make someone else's life just a little bit easier. I would never wish this decision on anyone. But if a woman faces it, I hope that by hearing Rose's story, she knows she's not alone. We are not alone. There are many women like us. But regardless of the reason a woman decides to have an abortion, it is not a decision that is made lightly. It is one that is made after much consideration for yourself, for your family, and your future family. It is made with much debate within oneself and with those who are important in your life, your family, and your doctor. It is made because you face real problems, such as, how will I raise this child? How will I feed this child? How will I survive? How will my family survive? What will this child's life be like? What will its quality of life be like? These problems are not superficial. They are not going to be fixed overnight. They are not going to be solved with an extra 72 hours. When a woman makes the decision to have an abortion, she has already been thinking about it a lot longer than 72 hours. Putting an additional 72-hour wait restriction on a woman is not going to help her solve the problem she has. She is not going to suddenly have the money to feed this child. She won't magically have a strong support system. And if her reason is like mine, 72 hours won't give us a medical marvel that will make her child's life one that won't be filled with pain and agony. This 72-hour wait isn't about trying to alleviate future regret. This 72-hour wait is the bill's sponsors' hope that they can make it such a burden to get an abortion that a woman won't take the time to do it. But here's the thing. Women will find a way to do what they know is best in their best interest, their family's best interest, and their unborn's best interest. All a 72-hour wait will do is make this already hurting woman hurt more. For me, it would have been 72 more hours of me dodging questions like, when are you due? Is it a boy or a girl? It would have been 72 more hours of feeling the pain of failure as I was not able to protect my child as all mothers want to do. This was the hardest and saddest decision I have ever made, but one that I made because it was in my best interest, my family's best interest, and because I love my baby so much that I couldn't stand the thought of her being born in pain and agony and only to ever see the walls of a hospital. It was a heartbreaking decision, but one I have never regretted, and a decision I would choose again if I was ever faced with it. I thought long and hard about that decision, but once it was made, my will never faltered. An additional 72-hour wait, extra ultrasounds, mandatory videos would not have changed my mind. They would have just caused me more pain than I was already going through. The decision to have an abortion is a decision that is best left to a woman, her family, her faith, and her doctor, not a group of politicians. How dare you insult women by substituting your judgment for hers? This 72-hour wait period will not change mine. It will only shame women and cause them further pain. It is insulting for you to score political points on the backs of Missouri women facing deeply personal, heartbreaking medical decisions. What happened to me can happen to anyone. Think about your wives, your daughters, your sisters. I ask you to act with compassion and respect for women's judgment. Do not vote for this 72-hour waiting period.
May I inquire of my fellow Missourian woman filibuster?
You may. I yield to Mevi.
And you're going to stay here with me?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm going to take my sunglasses off.
All right, I can join you for that. I apologize, it's a little bright today.
It's a little bright and a little windy. And I'm trying to get this microphone so people out there watching us can hear us. So hi, my name is Mevi, and I'm a member of Women's Voices Raised for Social Justice. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today, Liz. So this is a pretty interesting thing we're trying to do here. We're trying to talk for 72 hours non-stop, come rain or shine, day or night, outside of the Capitol here in Missouri. We're on the inside. Politicians are telling women that they need an extra triple of the mandatory delay after they've already sought an abortion and gone through so much of the painstaking decision-making process, Liz, that you went through. We're out here because we're not convinced that they understand inside there really what it's like, or really who we are. So I want to ask you, Liz, to tell us a little bit more about yourself, who you are. You mentioned that you married, and you'd been married 5 years. Talk to me a little bit more about how you came to the decision to try and be a parent, and then and just let's let them know who we are and what we think about.
All right. Like all married couples, starting essentially the day you decide to get married, people start asking you, so when are you having kids? My husband and I fended that off for quite some time. I wasn't entirely sure when I wanted to start that journey in my life. I was thinking, maybe I wanted to be a professional and really dedicate myself to something. And just as a turn of events, it just clicked. It was New Year's Eve, and we just decided, you know what? I think it's time. It's a new year. Let's start a new journey in our lives together. My husband knew that he was, about to come up for this promotion opportunity, and it was just the right time for us to start a family. And that was kind of the beginning, and the end of that decision was just we wanted to be a family. We wanted to share the happiness that we had for each other with someone else.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And you said it a little bit at the beginning, but the wind might have been blowing. I think it's important that the elected officials inside know what we, the women of Missouri, are thinking, who we are. I know I live in a suburb outside of St. Louis. I picked my house because it's in a school district that I wanted before we even had kids, that I thought I wanted my kids to go to, because education is something my husband and I really value, because we are fortunate enough to have gone to college and then have been able to get a good job and see what that can do for ourselves and our community. So can you tell the people watching us and the people inside a little bit more about who you, Liz Read Katz, are?
That's a tough question. I am a trained pastry chef, and I have worked in that field not as much as I should have. I have done many jobs before. I did go to school actually to be a teacher. And unfortunately, we move a bit, and so moving is not really conducive to being a teacher. So I have done your odd jobs, working at the mall, just helping support the family. And I now currently live in Columbia, Missouri, in the old Southwest, right by the university, walking distance to downtown. And actually, I love the Columbia life. I love that everything it's a really awesome community. I never expected it to find such a great community, but we did. And like I said when I spoke before, we found a house with a white picket fence, a nice backyard that we looked at and just imagined our kids running around in the green backyard. It was, Columbia was our family destination. It was the destination for us to have.
So, like me and like many of the women who will be participating in this filibuster over the next 3 days, we're really heartland people with heartland values. And, I think tragedy doesn't necessarily go by partisan value or income or what area of the country you live in. We happen to live here in Missouri, and it sounds like tragedy really struck you once you went in and had that test. I wonder if you could tell people a little bit more about what you were feeling as you went through and they started telling you things might not be going well with your pregnancy.
So up until 16 weeks, I had an ultrasound and they said it looks good. So I had blood tests done right after that, and we were actually in the car on our way to a friend's wedding, 4 hours away, about 2 hours into the drive, I got a call from from the PA, the physician's assistant, and I thought, okay, wow, she's calling. That's really nice of her. You know, usually the nurse practitioner calls, or the medical assistant rather. And so I was a little bit stunned, but I was like, oh, okay, she's just being nice. So I called her back, and she rattled off a bunch of numbers first that I can't tell you. I don't know. I do remember her saying, you know, your child most likely doesn't have Down syndrome. But then she brought up trisomy 18, also known as Edwards syndrome. And at that point, she actually only told me that the results came back as 1 in 10. So we continued driving. We got to the wedding, where I then actually made the cake for the wedding while we were there. My parents were there, or my mom was there. It was an old family friend, and we didn't want any of them to know about it because I felt terrible. I didn't want to bring down their wedding. I didn't want to bring down the feel of the wedding or anything like that. And everyone, I was probably the most doom and gloom. I was sitting there going, this is not good, this is not good. And everyone was like, no, it's a 1 in 10 chance, 90% chance, everything is going to be just fine. And it was the following Wednesday that I went and I met with the perinatologist. And we found out then when I met with the genetics counselor that the test actually showed a greater than 1 in 10. On that, the testing that they had done couldn't get more in depth than that. And at that point, for whatever reason, my mind changed, and everyone else was telling me, oh, that's not good. And I was like, no, it'll be okay, it'll be okay. However, 3 days later, when the initial results came back, for anybody who doesn't know, when you do an amniocentesis and you decide to check for a chromosomal issue, they can do an initial test called a FISH test, and it takes 48 to 72 hours to come back. And that 48 to 72 hours, all they do is count the number of chromosomes. So it's just, if there's more than the 46 that they're looking for, they know that there's something wrong. So they knew that immediately. There were 3 of the 18. And so a genetic counselor called me right before the close of business on a Friday, and she said, are you at home? And I said, yes. And she said, and I said, yes. My husband's on his way home from work. You can tell me whatever you need to tell me. And she said, I'm really sorry, but it does look like your child has trisomy 18. And I said, I know. And she's like, I didn't know. I didn't think that was going to be it. And I just said, I know. And that was, and she asked if I had any questions or anything like that. At that point, I had done research and had talked to her, and I knew what the outlook was. And I knew that if we had tried, we would have had to search for a hospital that would even operate on a baby with trisomy 18. And I knew that he or she at that point would be immediately whisked away to surgery if that was even an option. And I just thought about compassion. Would I want to live and only know pain and heartache? Would I want that kind of existence for me? And would I want to put my child through that? And I couldn't. I couldn't in good conscience have a child that would only know suffering and pain.
Liz, thank you so much for sharing that. That just sounds heart-wrenching. And what I hear and you're saying is that you talked to so many people and you did so much research and you had so much thinking. I was wondering just what motivated you to come out here and talk today, and especially how do you feel when you hear a politician saying that when we hear things about our pregnancies or that we might be pregnant, that we're hysterical or that we are thinking straight and that we can't act on our own? wondering, what does that make you feel when those politicians inside, some of them, not all of them, say that? After you've been what you've been through, how does that make you feel? And I'm going to give this to you so it can get closer to your mouth.
Okay. Well, I'll address the first part of it, which was I come out and I speak at these events, and I do this because to me it was really healing. I mentioned I felt really alone when this happened because there's such a stigma associated with abortion in our country, and when it happened to me, I didn't know anyone else who this has happened to. I thought I was the only one, and it wasn't until after I talked about it that people were saying, oh yeah, that's what happened to my cousin. Well, when we said she lost the baby, she really had an abortion because of a trisomy or some other incompatible with life diagnosis. And I just decided that that can't be the way it is anymore. We have to change that. If we want to change society's perceptions, it has to start somewhere, and I either had to stand up or sit down. And if I sat down, nothing was going to change. And so I stood up. And it was definitely a big part of my healing process because I felt that by doing this, I was giving more meaning to my daughter's life than just sorrow. And as I said, I can't imagine that any child would want her mother or father only feeling sorrow when they think of them. And that's why I'm here today. That's why I speak with passion about this. And that's why I wish I could do more. And as far as politicians, you think that they know what's better for women like me and women like you and for any woman out there listening. It's ridiculous. Nobody knows you better than you. You have to make decisions for yourself. I can't imagine anybody saying this is going to be... I apologize. It's really hard because I just get so aggravated thinking about it. Thinking that somehow or another a politician thinks he knows me better than I know myself. He knows my family and knows what we're going through, that he or she could stand up and say, this is what you need to do with your life today. This is how it is going to, without thinking about the consequences, that this isn't just...
I'd like to inquire of my fellow Missourian.
You yield?
I yield.
All right.
Thank you.